Hi, this is Bishop Craig in Lansing, and this is Take One for the week of the 13th of August. Peace be with you. We are praying for the people in Hawaii in response to the wildfire, and indeed there are opportunities for us to help. The newsletter comes out on the 15th, and there will be something in the newsletter that'll give you information on how you can help, which I guess is the newsletter is a good time for me to ask you who watch this video to remind the people of your congregation that they can go to the Synod webpage and scroll down on the right and subscribe to all of our Synod publications, including the Take One videos, the weekly updates that come out Tuesday at 10, and the newsletter that comes out on the 15th of the month. So if you've not reminded your congregation to do that in a while, please ask them to do that. There's also a Facebook group, and you can follow me on Twitter. I guess it's called X now. So please, I'm amazed at how many people just really don't know what we're doing or that they can get a newsletter. So please share that news. Thanks. My week this week is turning into a surprising week in that I think I'm going to be spending a lot of Zoom meetings with church councils and congregational leaders as congregations discern their future. I have just finished doing a major rewrite of the call process manual, and that will go to the staff today, and we hope be out in September. Rereading that for the first time in a few years, boy, how things have changed. We had to change it because of the fewer number of candidates. So as I read the call process manual, it suggested that when the time is right, you'll get a number of profiles to sort through and pick the ones you want to interview, and that doesn't happen anymore. We're grateful when we can get a congregation one candidate. We usually get them more than one, but rarely do we get them more than one candidate all at the same time. So the call process has changed from how do these candidates compare to each other to one at a time, is this the one that God is sending to be our pastor? So I tell call committees that it's more like courting than hiring. We've also introduced more flexibility into the call process. When I started, we used to have to persuade congregations you need to wait before you begin the call process. You need to get an interim, and the rule was 1 month for every year your pastor was there before you kind of start the call process. Now the wait is built into the system, so that with the fewer candidates, I assure you, you don't need to wait. You will wait. I mean, I could be surprised, but you should plan on waiting. So we have congregations beginning the ministry site profile sooner rather than later, knowing that when it comes time to interview, we may have a few right away, one or two, but if those aren't the right ones, then the wait is going to be longer. So the wait is built into the system, which changes the nature of interim ministry. The interim pastor used to work to get the congregation ready, and then they submit the paper, and there'd be all these candidates, which there aren't anymore. So flexibility is in the system now. Start earlier. And I guess the last thing I'd say that I've kind of rewritten the call process manual is we need to be aware that part-time pastors, we can't produce them. If it's a part-time call, we are really dependent on someone showing up in a community saying, I am a pastor, I'd like to be a pastor, I'm here for another reason. My spouse has a job, or I moved to be closer to children or grandchildren. So when a part-time pastor shows up, we really need to go for it, if you will. Many congregations are feeling content, or maybe I'll say an increasing number of congregations are feeling content with a retired pastor doing supply work. And that works until the retired pastor says, I'm done doing supply work. And then the question seems to be, well, why don't you have another retired pastor for us? Because we don't. Retired pastors eventually want to retire. So a lot of time this week thinking about the call process, last week as well. So the manual, I hope, will be out in September. The readings for Sunday, Genesis is the fulfillment of the Joseph story. Joseph says, to his brothers, God did this for good, and I will bring you near me, because we're going to have 5 more years of famine. And it sounds like a happy end of the story. Of course, in typical human ways, there arises a Pharaoh in Egypt who doesn't know Joseph, and the family of Joseph is very productive, and they're worried that the Israelites are going to grow to such a number that they will take over. And so the Israelites go from being welcome guests to slaves, and we move into the Moses story. It's amazing how God can do things that work for good, and then we human beings can take the things that work for good and find the bad in them. But right now we're content with the Joseph story that we worked for good. The Romans story, the Romans reading, Paul calls himself a member of the tribe of Benjamin, and assures us that God's expanding the welcome in Jesus to all people does not mean that God is giving up or cares less about the first ones that God called Israel, that is not the case. So often when grace gets given to others, we think it's a zero-sum game, and we'll get less if there's more for others. And God's grace isn't that way. God's love is enough for all of us. So God's grace. And then third, the gospel reading. I like 2 things about the gospel reading. First, this Canaanite woman kind of takes Jesus to school a little bit. She's begging for mercy. And first he ignores her, and then he says he's only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and then it's not good to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. And she says, okay, Jesus, you can call me a dog, but even the dogs get the scraps. And I think Jesus is schooled in that moment and realizes that his mission is bigger than he thought. So again, God's grace is bigger, and there is enough for all, especially in Jesus. And then the other piece that I'm chewing on is the whole idea of it's not what goes into a person that defiles, but what comes out. And the invitation there is we look at our own hearts rather than the activities of others. So that's what I am thinking about this week, and I look forward to conversations with council presidents. It is turning cold, at least where I was, so I hope that it gets warm again and that you find time to enjoy the summer. I'm Bishop Craig. This is Take One. The peace of Christ be with you always. Take care.